The late afternoon sun was a blinding, low disk over the Fort Talon Range in West Texas. The intense heat of the day lingered, creating a dizzying, unstable mirage above the ground. Corporal Elias Vance, assigned to administrative rotation, stood at the edge of the observation deck. He was an unremarkable figure, average height, uniform worn but clean, and in his hand, a canteen of water had long since gone lukewarm. The performance unfolding on the firing line was not going to plan. It was a disaster. General Marcus Sterling, whose name was etched onto memorial walls across the country for his battlefield competence, was battling a ghost, the ghost of his own past perfection. He had fired his custom, long-range .338 Lapua rifle 11 times. 11 shots. 11 catastrophic misses. The paper targets at the challenging 900-yard baseline distance remained untouched, mocking the legend. Major Grant Halsey, the general's executive officer, maintained a facade of military stoicism, but the tension in his rigid posture was clear. Around them, 24 soldiers, here to witness a masterful exhibition, were instead watching a man's pride collapse under the weight of his own reputation. Elias watched, tracking the subtle physical tells, the general's rushed, shallow breathing, the small, sudden muscle tremors in his neck, the white-knuckle grip on the rifle's forend. Elias recognized the familiar process where skill is poisoned by fear, turning muscle memory into unreliable guesswork. Before we delve into the core of this spectacular failure, let us know in the comments below, have you ever seen a seemingly invincible leader completely break under unexpected pressure? Captain David Ortiz, the range officer, stood rigid, his gaze oscillating nervously between his clipboard and the access road. A high-level NATO tactical delegation was due to arrive in less than 30 minutes. The entire carefully choreographed schedule was disintegrating. The general pulled back from the rifle with a violent, frustrated gesture, removing his shooting glasses. He pressed the heels of his hands against his eyes, the gesture of a man worn down, defeated not by distance or wind, but by himself. Elias knew the general's rifle, a machine engineered for distances far beyond 2 miles. That it could not connect at 900 yards was an indictment of the mind controlling it, not the hardware. The general returned for his final attempt. Elias watched the physics. The sustained 14-mile-per-hour crosswind was a factor, but insufficient to explain the broad, inconsistent pattern of the misses. The problem was entirely internal. The general was fighting his history. The 13th shot cracked across the range. Elias didn't need the spotter's report. He saw the general's shoulders drop in defeat the instant the recoil hit. The round sailed wide. Major Halsey finally moved, approaching the general with the careful, measured steps of a man approaching a tripwire. He spoke quietly, advising a tactical retreat, a reset, a rescheduling. The general ignored him. He straightened, his face flushed and burning with the setting sun and his own rage. His voice rose, sharp and cracking, demanding attention from every soldier present. General Sterling, is this all we have left? Are the marksmen in this army all hiding behind computer screens now, waiting for a memo? The challenge hung in the still air, a raw, unfiltered demand born from wounded pride. The assembled marksmen, skilled shooters all, stared at their boots. No one moved. No one wanted to be the man who failed after the general. Lieutenant Eric Chen, the general's aide, froze over his tablet. Captain Ortiz was now openly desperate, glancing towards the road. Elias set down his lukewarm canteen. He felt the weight of his own history, all those classified missions, the impossible engagements, pressing against his ribs. the instinct to remain the ghost, the invisible professional, warred with the stark knowledge that a solution was urgently needed. His soft-soled boots made almost no sound on the gravel as he walked toward the firing line. Every head turned. Whispers started, quickly dying as the general's enraged gaze locked onto this unknown corporal. The general's eyes swept over Elias, unremarkable, junior enlisted, calculating his audacity. "Vance," said his voice quiet but carrying perfectly in the tense silence. "Sir, I can try, if you'll allow it." The general studied Corporal Vance for a long, heavy moment, his jaw working as if chewing on the words he had decided not to speak. Elias met his gaze steadily, without challenge or arrogance, simply waiting. He knew that the worst mistake in a moment like this was to appear eager. "Your name, Corporal?" "Vance, sir. Elias Vance." Elias offered no unit, no specialty, no rank-based elaboration. Those details were sealed behind need-to-know protocols. The general glanced at Major Halsey, who offered a quick, pragmatic shrug. They had nothing left to lose. "Very well, Corporal Vance. Show us what administrative duty has taught you." Elias moved to the rifle, the very custom .338 that had defeated its owner. He did not immediately touch it. Instead, he assessed the sight picture, read the distant flags, and felt the specific angle of the setting sun against his face. Heat shimmer was intensifying, adding a complex, unstable visual variable. He heard Specialist Tina Gomez whisper something about the crazy audacity of the situation. He heard Corporal Mark Hayes mutter something that sounded like mockery. Elias ignored them all. He had perfected the art of creating silence inside his own head, even when the world outside was pure chaos. He settled into the prone position. The rifle stock felt familiar against his shoulder, a constant comfort across 100 different weapons and environments. His breathing slowed instantly, dropping into the deep, disciplined rhythm that was the foundation of his trade. The first shot was nearly instantaneous. He didn't decide to fire. His finger simply completed its smooth press the moment all the variables aligned. The crack was sharp. Captain Ortiz, over the radio, surprised. "Hit! Center mass! 900 yards!" The deck erupted in confused murmuring, skepticism dissolving into genuine shock. Elias didn't flinch. He was already cycling the bolt and adjusting his scope for a minute shift in the crosswind. His second shot followed within 20 seconds, punching through the paper 2 inches left of the first impact. Captain Ortiz's confirmation now carried a note of intense curiosity. Major Halsey had abandoned his rigid stance and moved closer to the spotting scope. Specialist Gomez had put down her ammunition can and was staring with the wide-eyed amazement reserved for witnessing magic. Elias continued. Third, fourth, fifth shots, each placed with the mechanical precision of someone who had long transcended the need for conscious thought. The general, now standing beside Major Halsey, watched with the calculating assessment of a veteran recognizing profound capability. Lieutenant Chen was still frantically searching the redacted files, finding only dead ends. Escalating the impossible. Elias shifted his aim. Ignoring the 900-yard targets, he focused on the distant 1,600-yard silhouettes, distances most shooters would only attempt with specialized crews. His seventh shot sailed over a mile and found its mark with the certainty of gravity. He fired again and again, each shot a ballistic statement. His 11th shot impacted at 2,400 yards, a distance where environmental factors and mathematics often make success impossible. The general had abandoned all pretense of superiority and was now actively spotting for him. 2,400 yards! Confirmed hit!
Lieutenant Chen finally broke away from his tablet, whispering urgently to the general about the security roadblocks in Vance's file. The general nodded, his expression shifting from curiosity to profound recognition. Elias fired his 12th shot, hitting a target at 2,600 yards. Only then did he pause, acknowledging the general's presence as the older man knelt beside him. "Corporal Vance," the general said, his voice quiet, devoid of the earlier bluster. "How far can you truly reach?" Elias glanced downrange, past all the conquered targets, toward the absolute boundary marker, 4,000 yards. "The equipment matters greatly at that distance, sir. The rifle is excellent, but its optimal range is well short of 4,000. The barrel harmonics, the scope magnification, the ammo load, all will create unpredictable variables past 3,000. It turns marksmanship into something approaching alchemy." Lieutenant Chen came reappearing, confirming his fears. "Sir, his classified designation suggests extreme deep field operations. The clearances needed are beyond this base's authority." The general's eyes never left Vance's. He was no longer frustrated, he was invigorated. "I know the risks. We have NATO guests in 20 minutes. Show them, Corporal Vance. Show us what 4,000 yards looks like. Even with the wrong rifle, show us what you can do." Elias hesitated, not out of fear, but calculation. The probability was near zero, but the stakes, the institutional reputation, and the urgent need to solve the general's crisis demanded he try. "I will need 3 shots to calibrate, sir. The first 2 will be pure reconnaissance. The third might connect if the physics cooperate." The Alchemy. The firing line. The 4,000-yard attempt. The general nodded slowly, understanding the gravity and the humility in Vance's offer. This wasn't guaranteed success. It was a professional assessment of an impossible task. Elias returned to the rifle. 4,000 yards stretched before him like a vast, shimmering void, a distance where the target existed more as a mathematical coordinate than a physical object. Major Halsey had taken over the primary spotting scope, with his hands shaking slightly as he tried to acquire the impossibly distant target through the intense heat shimmer. The entire enterprise felt less like marksmanship and more like a desperate act of faith. Elias based his first calculation on memory and intuition, compensating for the Coriolis effect from the Earth's rotation, the density altitude from the desert heat, and the unpredictable spin drift from the non-specialized barrel. He fired the reconnaissance round. The general and Major Halsey froze, binoculars raised. 4.8 seconds. That was the time of flight. It stretched into a frozen eternity, enough time for every possible doubt to flood the mind. Captain Ortiz, after a long, agonizing pause. "Miss, high and right by 32 yards. Good grouping, but high." 32 yards was 32 meters at this distance, but the miss was a data point. The wind and drop were far more severe than even the expert calculation suggested. Elias made the mental adjustments, shifting his aim point in ways that would look arbitrary to the untrained eye. Specialist Gomez held her breath, her face pale with vicarious stress. He fired the second shot. Another long, crushing 4.8 seconds. Captain Ortiz, voice strained with disbelief. "Miss, closer, left edge of the target zone, perhaps 10 yards off." The calibration was working. The variables were yielding to data. Elias settled for the final shot. His mind processed the complex variables, gravity, wind, trajectory, and equipment limitations with the speed of a specialized supercomputer. He achieved perfect physiological silence, letting his heart rate drop until only the essential signals remained. The general had moved closer, standing directly behind Vance, a silent, immobile witness to the moment of truth. Elias applied pressure to the trigger. There was no single moment of discharge, only the seamless completion of a process. The familiar recoil pushed against his shoulder. Then came the waiting, the final agonizing 4.8 seconds. Major Halsey was stone. General Sterling was motionless, binoculars fixed. Captain Ortiz, voice cracked with disbelief. "Hit! Center mass! 4,000 yards! We have a hit!" The observation deck erupted. Specialist Gomez let out a choked shock of shock. Corporal Hayes actually stumbled backward as if struck. Major Halsey let out a sharp, relieving exhale. Elias sat up, his movements economical. The adrenaline was absent. For him, the impossible was merely routine. He secured the general's rifle, stood and brushed the dust from his uniform. Major Halsey approached, extending his hand, a gesture that transcended rank and protocol. "Corporal Vance," he said, his voice thick with sincerity, "that was the finest long-range shooting I have witnessed in 30 years of service." The general approached, returning Elias's salute with a sharp, crisp precision.
I have served alongside the finest marksmen this nation has ever produced, Corporal. Operators whose actions saved countless lives. I recognize that unique, lethal caliber when I see it. The sound of approaching motorcades broke the spell. The NATO delegation had arrived, exactly on schedule. The demonstration was ruined, but the story was now legendary. The Mirror and the Legacy. The general, his earlier frustration replaced by profound satisfaction, quickly began narrating the unprecedented demonstration to the delegation. Vance provided the official cover story, long-range cadre instructor. Later that afternoon, Elias sat in a chair across from the general's desk in the office, filled with decades of military memorabilia. The general poured 2 glasses of water, avoiding eye contact. "I wanted to thank you, Corporal Vance," he said without preamble. "Not just for the demonstration, but for reminding an old soldier that true excellence still exists. This morning, my struggle was entirely mental. The skills were there, but the clutter was overwhelming." "You are not as far from that excellence as you believe, sir. You were simply fighting the memory of who you used to be, and that is a battle no marksman can win." The general smiled, a genuine expression that softened the hard lines of his face. He leaned back in his chair. "I have made calls. Your next assignment will reflect your capabilities. No more administrative limbo. It's time your skills served their true purpose." Elias had expected this, the loss of his carefully cultivated obscurity, but he also understood that such capabilities were resources, and resources must be deployed. "Major Halsey told me about your conversation with Specialist Gomez. That was excellent leadership. You showed that excellence does not require arrogance." The general stood and moved to his window, looking out over Fort Talon. "We tell ourselves stories about who we are, Corporal, and sometimes those stories need updating. This morning reminded me of my limitations, but also that the mission continues, even when individual capability fades." He turned back to face Elias, his expression carrying the weight of hard-won wisdom. "You were the mirror that showed me both what I used to be and what I must now become." Elias stood and saluted. The general returned it crisply. As Elias walked back across the base, he felt the stares. He was no longer invisible. Soldiers offered nods of acknowledgement. Officers gave respectful greetings. Corporal Hayes and Sergeant Voss,
The former mockers straightened and offered salutes that carried genuine respect. The sun began its final descent, painting the sky amber and rose. Elias paused, existing in this new space, neither forgotten nor essential, neither deployed nor invisible. And that is the truth Elias Vance earned for every person watching. Your biggest failure is not the missed shot. It is letting the mental clutter, the fear of a perfect outcome, or the ghost of your past rob you of the silence needed to execute the shot now.